at the University of San Francisco. I'd been reading about Islam. I had read about a number of religions in the past, and I had been recently reading about Islam for a few months, and I decided to go down and talk to them and answer a few questions, or have a few questions answered, some curiosities. I went down, I spoke to the 3 students there for about 15, maybe 20 minutes, and then began preparing to leave, and to return to my normal, everyday San Franciscan, that might sound like a contradiction, but normal, everyday San Franciscan life. And as I was about to leave, the young student imam of the masjid asked me, Doctor, do you have any last questions? I told him, no, thank you very much for your time, I really appreciate it. And then I did think of something, so I said to him, I do have one question. Could you tell me what it feels like to be a Muslim? I mean, could you describe your relationship to God? How do you see God? How does He see you? How do you see your relationship to God? Just tell me what it feels like. So he didn't answer me immediately. He just kind of lowered his head, lowered his eyes, looked like he was muttering something. I assumed it was some sort of supplication. And then, with his eyes still closed, he started to just sort of wag his head from left to right. I don't know why. But then he suddenly just sort of blurted out something to me that seemed more like a call or a prayer than a part of an answer. And he just suddenly said, Allah. And he exhaled a deep breath and said, is so great. And there is nothing that compares to Him, he said. In comparison to Him, we human beings are less than a single grain of sand. And as he spoke, he took a non-existent speck of sand, pressed it between his 2 fingers, and lowered it to the floor we were sitting on, parting his fingers and revealed nothing. And he said, and yet, Allah loves us more than a mother loves her baby child. He says, and nothing happens but by the will of Allah. He said, when we take a breath, it is by the will of Allah. And when we breathe out, it is by the will of Allah. He said, when we go to take a step and lift that foot off the ground, that would never take place except that Allah allows it. And we would never bring the foot back down to the ground unless He was overseeing every instant. And he said, and when the tiniest leaf falls from a tree and twists and turns on its journey to the ground, no segment of that journey would take place except by Allah's command. And with his eyes still nearly closed, he said, and when we pray and put our nose to the ground, we feel a peace and a rest that's outside this world. And he shook his head and he said, you just have to experience it to know. Well, he got through his explanation, and when I looked at him, he looked clearly disappointed in himself. And the other 2 brothers there were looking at him with a curious look on his face. Clearly they felt that the answer was not what I needed. They knew that from the preliminary conversation that I was a math professor at the university. People have this myth about math professors that they're very logical, they think very coherently, they have everything ordered. And that such a spontaneous, sort of emotional response certainly wouldn't have appealed to anyone. And I'm all the more sure that that must have been their feeling, because a few seconds later when I asked them, how do you become a Muslim, and then became one in the next breath, they were completely shocked. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's very difficult to talk about strategies of presenting Islam to others. I think sometimes we strategize too much. Sometimes it's a single word or a sentence that you never thought would be someone would be able to relate to, that grabs another person's heart. Sometimes I think ultimately we just have to trust that if we say what we believe and feel and present it sincerely, honestly, and openly, that somehow, if Allah wants to use us to reach the other person, to communicate, We have to somehow leave that sometimes in his hands. I'm not saying we should do it irresponsibly or unthinkingly, but we have to be sincere and open and honest. Because for the first 15 minutes that day, I thought I was the victim of strategies. But when I asked him to just tell me how it felt to him to be a Muslim, I felt that I was being presented something real. And that was always my complaint when I sat in audiences listening to Muslim speakers or any religious speakers. They weren't really telling what the religion is. You know, they'll tell you about the dogmas and the fundamental beliefs and the pillars and Islamic law and science and the Quran. But I would always sit there and think, well, what does that have to do with me? You know, I want to know what Islam is. How does it live in your life? How does it shape your existence? Why does it give you peace, if it does give you peace at all? How does it give you peace as opposed to other religions? What kind of peace are you talking about? You're saying Islam is the religion of peace. What peace? You mean you're just not going to fight wars? What kind of peace are you talking about? Now, it says in the Quran that Allah never sends a messenger to a community except in that community's language, and one from among themselves. It's a natural enough statement. Many people would say it's not deeply profound. But if you think about it, it underlines a very important point. If we think about what a language is much more than a system of verbal symbols by which we relate information back and forth. A language is very much a cultural vehicle. It carries a people's past. It carries their experiences, their fears, their hopes, their dreams. If you study the English vocabulary, you could read into it many of their experiences, many of their hopes, many of their aspirations, by the words that appear most frequently. Two native speakers discussing something with each other could convey more information oftentimes in a couple of sentences than a native speaker with an expert who understands his language in an expert fashion, grammatically and etc., vocabulary, but who hasn't lived the language as he has. It may take 2 pages or an entire book before they can relate to each other on the same level. And the same goes with, that's reinforced by the fact that Allah sends the messenger from the people themselves. Well, we're all living right now in the United States of America, most of us for some good time. We've mastered the language, we've lived to some extent in the culture, but we Muslims have a tendency to be quite isolationist, at least to some degree, especially when it comes to our religion. And I feel that we really don't understand the audience we're trying to reach. Now, how do you come to know your audience? Well, the Quran suggests communication. Now, communication is more than lecturing at somebody. It's more than having this agenda of information you're going to explain to someone. Communication is a give and take. There's 2 ways to it. One is conveying your information, the other one is listening. And really listening. Because the more you know your audience, the more you can avoid falling into certain barriers and pitfalls. I find most of the time when people of different religions discuss with one another, they oftentimes end up fighting about things they really agree on, and agreeing about things they really don't agree on. And we Muslims seem to do that quite a bit when we discuss our religion with Christians. We'll end up fighting for a half hour, 45 minutes on a point, and then we suddenly realize we're very close on those 2 points. Sometimes we'll agree on a matter, and we'll actually be very far apart, and we'll use the words as if they mean the same to both of us. How do you come to know a community? Well, through communication. And I mean, one of the best ways, and this is one of the ways I learned about other religions when I was an atheist, because I was always fascinated by the subject. A lot of people working in theology departments in the United States are atheists. But one of the ways I learned was I would sit with a person and try to ask them about their religion, discuss it with them. They'd sometimes be very defensive. I tell them, relax, I'm not here to judge you, I'm not here to convert, I just want to know. And then, as they began to explain things to me, I wouldn't attack them. I would try to make sure I understood what they were saying correctly. When you said this, did you mean this? Would you word it this way? If I explained it like this, would you agree with it? And then they would say, no, that's not what I mean. I would word it more like this. And through this give and take, I would get myself to the stage where I felt if I wrote a short article about that person's religion and he edited it, he would say, okay, that's fine, I agree with it. That was the level of knowledge I wanted to achieve. So that when I communicated with people of the Hindu faith, or the Muslim faith, or the Buddhist faith, that I wouldn't waste my time stumbling over false notions. So I could get right to the heart of the matter. Another method, equally essential, I believe, is to read. To read what the scholars of that religion have to say. Or read what the atheists have to say. Or read what the secularists have to say. But read what their point of view is. Because if you talk to the man on the street, oftentimes he's not an expert, he has contradictory notions, he disagrees with a fellow next to him. It's very hard. I found this especially difficult when talking to Muslims, to find out what the heart of the matter is. But oftentimes if you read what the scholars write, it gives you some foundation to work on. And then you could try to see how their ideas are communicated in the lives of the individual believers that you're dealing with daily. If you do come to understand what Western scholars and many Western people think about faith and religion, you'll very quickly come to realize that some of their questions, some of their essential questions that really are the dominant undercurrent in many ways for this culture, are some of the simplest and most difficult to answer. And we Muslims very seldom address questions like, what's the purpose of life? If God is love, if God is so merciful, then why are we here? If he could create heaven, why didn't he just pop us in there to begin with? You know, I remember there was a great Western writer named C.G. Jung, German writer. He wrote a beautiful book, Answer to Job. And he has his book has these questions repeated again and again and again. He's a psychiatrist, and he deals with patients. And he finds that his German patients have many inner conflicts because of these exact type of questions that we're dealing with. He brings up one question at one point. The Bible, for example, and I'm not here to put down the Bible, I'm just giving you the example, said the Bible has Adam punished for his sin, and so he's sent to this earthly life. It's a life of suffering. And he said, well, that has got to be the most unfair thing in the world. He said, here, God creates Satan. Satan dupes Adam. God empowers Satan and punishes Adam. If he doesn't want man to submit to temptation, if he wants man to live a good life, if he doesn't want man to sin, then why not just chain up the source of temptation? Destroy Satan altogether. If you want men to be good, take away the temptation. And these sort of questions really are deeply embedded in the culture, and I'm only going to talk for about a few more minutes about them. But they're very deeply embedded in the culture. My own 7-year-old and 6-year-old daughters are already bringing them to me. And maybe your children are bringing them to you. Asking you, this is a plural society, many different religions. Danny, how do we know we're right? Do other people think they're wrong? Or they'll ask the same question I asked. Daddy, why would God create us just to die and make us live again? Why didn't he just make us live permanently right now? Why do people die? Doesn't make sense. And many questions of similar nature. And believe me, if you watch the cartoons they watch, if you watch Nickelodeon, if you watch what they're learning in school, I'm not saying it's evil, but it very much reflects the culture and the questions that dominate this culture. So, famous questions between faith and reason, the age-old dilemma, that many a Western writer says that no religion has ever resolved. But yet it was the same questions and the same issues that blocked me from belief in God, that when I studied the Quran, I not only found the answers that satisfied me, but I found so much more that led me to become a Muslim. The reason why I think these questions, these issues, these topics are so important is because from my reading of the Quran, from the very first, I found this to be the dominant message of the Quran. The majority of verses of the Quran were revealed in Mecca. How many of those verses deal with rules and regulations? It's very difficult. Can you conceive of any? The predominant message was concept of God, man's relationship to God, ultimate goals, purpose of life, etc. It even challenges you to think about it. Do you think we created you purposely? Do you think you could have lived and attained to paradise without having suffered? Oh man, you are laboring towards your Lord in painful toil, but you shall meet him. It's challenging you to think about these, to confront these issues. It challenged me. But I think we Muslims are not conveying the information. Let's see, I have 5 more minutes, so I'll just give a few examples of something I talked about, and then I'll stop. Oftentimes, we end up talking past each other because we don't understand each other. Because we didn't make the effort to understand each other. For example, one example, I often hear Dudley Woodbury say to Muslims, why don't we share our faith experiences before a public audience? And Dudley Woodbury works for the Zwemer Institute, a missionary organization that targets the Muslim population, the worldwide Muslim population. And he often mentions that when he asks Muslims to share before audiences their faith experiences, they're at a loss. The Muslim, he says, always demands a debate. But when he comes back with this reply, they back off. Well, it isn't because Muslims don't have faith experiences. But when you ask a Muslim, what's his faith experience? It's not a question that he's used to hearing. It's not something he's used to thinking about. Because for a Muslim, he doesn't compartmentalize his life. Over here's my faith experiences. These are my political experiences. Over here's my work experiences. I'm not trying to make fun of Dudley Woodbury. I understand he's coming from one point of view where this is a central idea in his background to another domain where, for a Muslim, life is a faith experience. A faith experience. His whole life he tries to make into a faith experience. That's his ultimate goal. As it says, as the Quran tells us, his living, his striving, his dying, all is for God. The Muslim tries to consecrate every good act he does as an act of worship. When a mother picks up her baby, she says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. When a father drives his kids to the school and starts up his car, he says, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Because for the Muslim, the doing of any good deed is an act of worship, through which he learns goodness, through which he learns mercy, through which he learns compassion, so that he could experience and receive the infinite mercy, love, and compassion that comes from God. So he sees life as very different. But these points are often missed when Muslims and non-Muslims talk to each other because they just aren't really communicating. They're talking right past each other. A Muslim might ask the Christian, does your religion make sense? Many a Christian would say, is it supposed to? I mean, really, isn't faith, doesn't it transcend reason? Doesn't it go beyond reason? Don't you have to take the leap of faith? Do all miracles make sense, he would say? Do miracles make sense? Do all the acts of God make sense? So here the two communities have a fundamental difference of perception. One says, at some stage, faith has to go beyond making sense. The other one says, no, but yes, faith is the things we don't completely understand, but it shouldn't contradict reason. They're coming from two different points of view. The Muslim says, does your religion offer you a complete set of guidance that deals with every aspect of life, from going to sleep? The Christian says, that sounds like some sort of obsession. I mean, do you really want to do that? Can you blend, say, for example, religion and politics without detrimenting both? Aren't both corrupted in that process? Fundamental differences of point of view. The Christian might think that one of the great things he has on his side is a statement in the Bible that says, God, through Jesus, has reconciled the world to himself. They write it very frequently in their missionary literature. When a Muslim reads that, and as you well know, he reads that and says, well, why would he have to do that? I mean, didn't he get it right the first time? When the Muslim believes that when God created this world, as the Quran tells us, he knew full well that Adam would make errors, that his descendants would make errors, that there would be pain and suffering, etc. But this is part of his overall divine plan. This is a growing stage in his creative plan for man, to take him to a higher level, which risks, of course, descending to a lower level. But he sees life entirely different. He doesn't see this life as a punishment for a sin once committed. He sees it as an opportunity, as a gift that could take him to higher and higher states, higher than any other creature about him. What else? Even sometimes we use the same words, and this is my last example, and I'll close with this. We use the same words, and they have different meanings in the two communities, and it's the one I began with just a few seconds ago. The idea of worship. A professor in my department said, "How do you Muslims worship?" I told him exactly what I just told you a second ago. I said, "Well, I take my kids to school in the morning. We make love to our spouses." He said, no, I mean, how do you worship? What do you do? What is your worship? I said, well, I earn a living, work hard, bring home the paycheck. No, how do you worship? The point I was trying to make to him, in a striking way, is that let's agree on one thing, first of all, that we have a different concept of worship. I was trying to bring that point home in a very sort of stark way. So, the long and the short of what I'm trying to say is that I think we must make a bigger effort at trying to understand, to know the audiences that we're trying to communicate. And the second thing is that once we do, I think our communication will be infinitely more fruitful. I had many other things I wanted to say, but time is up, so thank you very much. Jazakumullah khair. May God reward you all. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace and mercy be upon you.
At least one stopwatch is working. Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey. And inshallah we'll share the experience of Imam Siraj Wahaj, who is the Imam of Masjid al-Taqwa, who is very famous, alhamdulillah, and very experienced in making da'wah, especially in the New York area, in the media. And I'm sure his experience will enhance our understanding of doing da'wah. And by the way, in front of all the three, I'm trying to get the three together to make a zonal conference for Islam on da'wah, inshallah. So I'm putting you on the spot so that you agree, the three of you. By the way, could the sisters help us come this side? We have plenty of space here at the in front over here. I would kindly appreciate it if the sisters can help us come this way. There are some sisters outside who are complaining. Always sisters are helpful and more helpful than men, so please do it.
I needed it. The lifesaver.
What time is this session over?
Let's see. I think it's 4:45, I think.
Okay, now it's what, 3:49 now?
Right.
3:49.
Supposed to finish at 4:30 and we have a lot of time for the people to interact with us.
It's good that our topics seem to be complementing each other.
Yeah.
Or was that really repetition?
No, mine will be repetition, so I'm not going to talk.
Let's have different perspectives.
Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا من سيئات اعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمد عبده ورسوله أما بعد. My brothers and sisters, I'm very thankful to Allah to share this platform with Sheikh Jamal Badawi and Dr. Jeffrey. This is a very good experience for me right now. Sheikh Jamal Badawi and myself have shared platforms many times, and I'm so happy to have him back. And I saw him today and I kind of complained because as a result of him being sick, that increased my work. So I was so happy that he's back here today. Now brothers and sisters, those of you who know me, I think you would say that I'm never at a loss for words, right? I always have something to say. But absolutely today, Brother Jamal Badawi and Dr. Jeffrey Lang have actually said what I want to say. And actually, no, they have. And why should I talk when they've already said it? So we don't want to repeat what they have said. So alhamdulillah, but since you expect me to say something, I'll just make 1 or 2 points. So, first, brothers and sisters, I want to make this point. I think that it's critical. I begin with a prayer that every one of us who is sitting here, standing here, would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that when we leave this conference that we be better da'i and da'iyah. Yes. I want you, those of you who are very shy, and sometimes even intimidated to talk to non-Muslims, to lose that. And in your way, as a professor, as a professional, as a student, as a so-called housewife, whatever your field is, you have to do your part. And I like the word that the Prophet used. And words are important. To invite the people to Allah. An invitation. So, number 1, let us make commitment that we will go back to our homes and invite people to Islam more than we've ever done before. Number 2, I believe that there are 2 extremes that we should avoid. One extreme is Muslims don't ever want to offend non-Muslims, so therefore they never say anything about our deen. Everything, oh, we just like you. We just like you. No, that's an extreme. Brothers and sisters, our book of guidance is not Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends. You have to understand that. Our book of guidance is Al-Quran. Okay, so don't be afraid to tell the truth, because you can't help them if you don't tell them the truth. Because what we keep from them will cause them to die and then be displeased by Allah. So we have the responsibility of trying to bring the truth to them. Don't deny what we have. Don't deny that we're different. We are different, but do it in the right manner. So that's the first extreme. And the other extreme is, as Brother Dr. Jamal Badawi and Brother Jeffrey is suggesting, too hard, too much. I was with some brothers going around a particular country in Europe, and the brother who was with us, them Kafirs. Kafirs. You know, we driving a car and look at them Kafirs. It's too much. It's too much. Can't invite them when you have that kind of attitude. So brothers and sisters, that's the first point I want to make, is that we have to be a balance in our approach of giving da'wah. And the advice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, تَعُضُ إِلَىٰ سَبِيلَ بِكَ بِالْحِكْمَةِ, wisdom. And wisdom is not left to our discretion. Wisdom is not how we define wisdom. I'm going to invite them with wisdom. Wisdom is how the Prophet did it. And so if you want to invite the people with wisdom, do exactly how the Prophet did it, and that's wisdom. Now, what I'm going to do now is just perhaps reiterate some of the great points that both of them have made, really, honestly, they have made them. One of the things about myself, and I want to be honest with you, I love giving da'wah. I do. I love talking about Islam to non-Muslims, to express our way. I love it. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I ask Him to give me the love to give da'wah. Therefore, because I want to give da'wah, I'm always searching for an opportunity to give da'wah. Many of us, we miss golden opportunities to give da'wah. You know why? Because we're not looking for them. Many times, brothers and sisters, if truth be told, we simply don't care about the people. And that's sad. that there are people around us who are dying. Not only are they dying in this world, but the concern about the hereafter. That here's a person that's dying that might wind up probably going to the hellfire. And yet there's perhaps something that I can do, that maybe if I would say something to them, invite them, drop the seed about Islam, maybe this person might one day find their way to a masjid or pick up a book and learn something about Islam. So I'm always looking for an opportunity. I'll give you an example. I was on a plane coming from Washington, D.C. on my way back to New York City. And I was sitting on the passenger, not the passenger, the aisle of the seat. And I had my laptop computer. And I was working on some notes. And there was a young man sitting to my right. And I noticed that he was like looking at me, looking over my shoulder, trying to see what I was writing. Now, I could have gone like this. But rather than do that, I kind of pushed it over a little bit, and I started writing da'wah. Yeah, I knew he was looking, so I was inviting him to Islam in the computer. There are literally every day golden opportunity, if you want to invite people to Islam. I'll give you another example. We were standing outside of our masjid in Brooklyn recently, in fact, sometime last year, and there was like some people loitering in front of the masjid. They just like standing around and talking. So here come one of the security brothers. You got to move. You can't stay here. You got to move on. I said, no, brother, don't make them move on. Look at it. I have a captive audience. Now I said, I know what. Now I can get rid of them. Maybe if I start talking about Islam, either they'll listen or I'll get rid of them. Golden opportunity. So as they were standing there, I said, did you know that this was a masjid? They said, no, we didn't know that. I said, yeah, this is a masjid. And, in fact, if you notice, about 15 minutes from now, some people will be coming here. You'll see about 30, 40, 50, 60 people coming here. They're coming here to make prayer. Have you been to a masjid before? A golden opportunity. Most of us, brothers and sisters, when someone comes like saying to you, here I am, talk to me, give me dawah, I'm ready, we don't take that opportunity. A golden opportunity. You must have in your heart a desire, an excuse to talk to this person. Let me make this one other point, and then we move on. Believe me, I'm not going to talk long, brothers and sisters. No, really, I'm not. No, I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to get a note, and I hate getting notes. This brother write me a note telling me to stop. I'm not going to. But I was in the airport, in LaGuardia Airport, New York City. And I decided that I was going to, before I got on the plane, my shoe needed shining. So I went and had the man to shine my shoes. Now, just so happened, to my right were 10 phones. The man had begun shining my shoe, and one of the phones started ringing. And so he said, excuse me. And he picked up a phone, and it was still ringing. He said, that's not my phone. He said, now, these 3 phones are mine. This one here is my boss. This one here is my wife. And this one here is my girlfriend's. Now, I'm saying now I gotta say something to this man. No, I have to go. Why? A golden opportunity to give down. Now, what am I gonna say? Right? So he came back, and he's shining my shoe. I said, you know what? If you're a Muslim, you wouldn't have a girlfriend. You could actually marry that woman. He said, but I can't afford to marry her. I said, well, consider what you're saying. She's good enough to be a girlfriend, but she's not good enough to marry. He said, yeah, you're right. That began a long conversation, an exchange about Islam, and invite him to Islam. That man will know something about Islam. We left that man, and that man will never, ever be the same. Here's a man, a Muslim, who told him something, responding to something that he said. So brothers and sisters, my first point, I just want a way of reiterating it, highlighting it, of reinforcing it, looking for opportunities. Number two, both our speakers here today have mentioned the importance of having the right attitude. You must. You have to have the right attitude. Now, I'm going to share something personal with me that happened. Allah blessed me to give a khutbah in a place called Gainesville, Florida. And this week, this Friday, happened to have been 1 week before a major holiday called Thanksgiving. And after I gave the khutbah, we had some of our brothers visiting from one of the Middle East countries. He said, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you that next week is so-called Thanksgiving. This is a Kafir holiday. That's not our holiday. And don't go visiting your relatives and friends because this is their holiday. Our day is the Eid. I said, can I say something? He said, yes. I said, you know, a few years ago, my mother, a non-Muslim, and her husband, my stepfather, invited me and my family, our Muslim family, to come to their house for Thanksgiving dinner. Rather than saying, Mom, I'm not coming, I said, okay. Allah is my witness. I went to the halal meat market. I bought a halal turkey. I bought chicken, halal chicken, beef. I bought rice and vegetables and gave it to my mother. I said, Mom, cook this food. She said, son, thank you very much. We went there. I took my family, and at that time I think I had 8 children. And we were all eating. And, they saw, my mother asked me to bless the table. And I asked Allah to bless the table. And then we were eating. And one of my children, don't ask me which one. I think it was Muhammad. He was about 5 years old. He said, Granny, when you going to become Muslim? When you and Pow Pow, that's my stepfather. When you and Pow Pow going to become Muslim? My mother looked at him, and you're not going to believe this. Her and my stepfather on that day said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Why? My mother knows we Muslim. She knows for years I'm Muslim, but my mother had an invitation to me, her son. Son, come over. Yes, Mom, of course we'll come over. And the kindness in buying food, and not only that, from that day, my mother always goes to halal meat market and buy halal meats. Because she said, something about this meat. This halal meat. So it's the good treatment, the kind treatment. And brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, we, in my opinion, do more rather than say, Mom, I can't come. You come to the Eid. I ain't coming to your holiday. And I made a mistake when I first became Muslim. Do you know, brothers and sisters, when I first became Muslim, I was 19 years old. And I had never argued with my father in my life, my stepfather. He never argued. But one day, it was a Sunday, I just become Muslim, and my mother was making Sunday dinner. And she was cooking ham. I said, you cooking that food, that hot food, nasty. Yeah. I said, but you've been eating this all your life. And so my stepfather comes, right? And my stepfather used to be a boxer. And so he came to me, he stepped to me like, so I said, so what's up? Like what you want, But this is the wrong attitude. The wrong attitude. So my mother eating pork, she eating another day in her life. But when I learned the attitude of being a Muslim and the right attitude and the right character, then my mother and father changed and they loved Islam. And on their job they talk about, yeah, my son he's a Muslim. My son, proud of their son because the character now is improving and he's a nice young man and an honorable young man. And so the best way to me, brothers and sisters, to give da'wah, the most important thing that we can say here today is the character. And to be like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to be like him in our character, and believe me, brothers and sisters, it makes a world of difference. Now, one more point, inshallah, then we be finished. There's nothing like having a right attitude about calling people to Islam. Now, brothers and sisters, a lot of people that you call to Islam are going to, even as Sheikh Jamal said, are going to try to antagonize you. Something happened recently, and I read about in the newspaper that really got the attention. There's one of the great pitchers now. He pitches for the Boston Red Sox. What's his name? Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens. I was testing you to see if you knew. But you know what? This man makes over $3 million a year in salary, pitching baseball. He was driving his, I think he had some kind of truck or van or something, to the ballpark. Look at this. He saw on the road a dog that appeared to be wounded. This happened like 3-4 weeks ago. He got out of the van, his van, to go assist the dog. Here's the man, not a Muslim. And when he tried to help the dog, apparently maybe the dog got hit by a car or something, the dog bit him. And as a result, he missed, I think, 2 pitching turns. I said, how wonderful that is. I want to write him a letter. No, commending him for that. But my point, brothers and sisters, when you're giving dawah to people, they don't understand. Many of them are wounded. And when you give them dawah, they will lash out at you. But they don't know, they don't understand. But despite that, you must be like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and be patient. And even though they try to defeat you in argument, your idea is not to defeat them in argument, but to give them, to show them, to offer them the light of Islam. So no matter how they treat you, brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, if they laugh at you, make mockery of you, you be patient with them. And say, no, you misunderstand it. And be your nice, beautiful self, with your beautiful smile. And no matter what they say to you, understand that they don't understand what they're doing. But you have the wisdom, you have the knowledge, you have the patience. Then use that. And the last thing, this is the last thing. No. Listen, let me tell you. No. If you watch me, you can tell. If I close this like that, I'm finished. No, I'm finished. I'll make this last point. Brothers and sisters, you know, one of the things that we have to do as Muslims is always to reflect, to look, to study, to observe. Allah blesses us by observing. Reflection is an ibadah, by the way. It's a worship. To sit, to think, and to reflect. You know, I used to be a member of the Nation of Islam. This movement still exists today. They're not Muslims. They believe themselves to be Muslims. Some of them are very sincere. I have made a pledge that, inshallah, if Allah blesses me, I will never stop giving da'wah to Minister Farrakhan. Never. Never until he dies. I don't care what he says. I will still go to him and invite him and encourage him to come to Islam. When I go to Chicago, I call Minister Farrakhan. I'm in Chicago. He said, come on by. Why? What am I doing? Inviting him to Islam. As a result of that, he came to New York. He called me on the phone. Imam Siraj, I'm in town. Come, let's go for breakfast. 4 hours. 4 hours speaking, inviting the man to Islam. Why? Because if this man comes to Islam, the gift that he can give, that Allah has given to him, we can use it for Islam. Why did Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam pray for Umar ibn Khattab to come to Islam? Why did he pray for Abu Jahl to come to Islam? They were enemies of Islam, but he knew that potentially everybody is a potential Muslim. Everybody, and that must be your attitude. President Clinton is a potential Muslim. Yes, he is. The Pope of Rome is a potential Muslim. Yes, he is. The rabbi. Yes, the rabbi too. My point. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can tell Musa and Harun
اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى وقولا له قولا لينا لعلهم يتذكر أو يخشى. You, Moses, and your brother Harun, go to Pharaoh, go to Pharaoh and say to him gentle words. Perhaps he would receive admonition or fear Allah. And if we go to Pharaoh, who can we not go to? Everybody, man, is a potential Muslim. You see the drunk man in the street. You see the prostitute. You see the wino. You see the man in the ghetto. Everybody is a potential Muslim. And you go to them and don't you put your nose up at anybody. And because maybe that one, the one that you walk past, might be another one to come to Islam, another Siraj Wahaj to come from the gutter and to come to the fold of Islam. You don't know. And I leave you with this, brothers and sisters, the spirit of a da'i. Humble, yes, but firm. Knowledgeable about your religion. And strong. And I close with this. And right, reflecting the nation of Islam and us as Muslims. I'm so happy and thankful to Allah that He blessed me. He saved me from shirk and brought me to Islam. I'm so thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I look back now and say, well, what lesson can I learn from the nation of Islam? They didn't have the truth. But there's something there that if we reflect, that maybe we as Muslims can grab something from there as a sign from Allah that we can use to make ourselves better. And you know what it was that I saw? They didn't have the guidance. But there was a spirit there that they had. I wish that we would have. One spirit. And that was an attitude. We must go there and get the people. They used to tell us, you can't come here unless you bring somebody. We used to come there sometimes alone and they would put us out. No, you go out there, man, and get the people and you bring them to the temple. That was a spirit of da'i. Everybody had to be a da'i. You go out there and talk to your neighbor. Talk to the people in school. Talk to your co-workers. Go out there and give the people the truth, what we say. We didn't have the truth, but we invited the people to what we had. And let me tell you about your little brother, what I did one day. I told the officials, go get me a bus. They said, what are you talking about? I said, I want a bus, man. I want to go get the people. You heard what our leader said? Our leader said we should go get the people. Give me a bus. This guy. So they gave me a bus. And I'm driving around. They said, where you going? Where you going? I said, go up this way. And we driving, brothers and sisters, and I see a park. I said, stop the bus. I got out of the bus. Allah's my witness. I went into the middle of that crowd. And I said, look, we in trouble. We need help. Islam will help you. Get in the bus. And they got in the bus. They got in the bus and we took them to our place of worship. What was it? Conviction, boldness. You convince, man, that Islam is right. You don't go there intimidated. Your professor don't intimidate you. You respect the professor, but Mr. Professor, I have something to say. Confidence, man. Boldness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not for yourself, but boldness because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. So brothers and sisters, we would have this boldness, this brother would not come and bother me. If you be bold, may Allah bless us, brothers and sisters, to get a spirit of da'wah, and to push our communities and learn from our brothers here. They have a wealth of knowledge and experiences to give us. Please, let us get it and go from this conference and give da'wah unlike we ever did before, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Brother Siraj. That was entertaining. By the way, you mentioned the bus. In Egypt, somebody went, taxi driver was driving by and a similar way. Somebody asked him how much I should pay you to take me nowhere. So he told him, pay whatever you want to pay and get down here. If I have to just maybe pick up one word from each of the speakers said was Dr. Jamal, I guess one of the best things I heard from him was to say the right thing at the right, to the right person at the right circumstances and the right way, the right manner. This is according to the teachings of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the Quran. And if I had to pick something from Dr. Jeffrey, was we good at telling people what's wrong with their religion, but we're not good at telling them what's good about our religion. And I think, Brother Siraj, everything is fresh in your mind, but mainly the Muslim character is the main thing that we have to stick to and to show the right example. I wish we have enough time to communicate with the speakers, but unfortunately we don't. So in the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes, we'll have discussion. So I'll start with the audience over here. I'll take a sister and a brother. But before I do that, before you ask a question and before you say your comment, think how are you going to contribute to the success of this session. If you think your comment or question is not going to contribute, please don't say it. Thank you. I'll let you speak.
Assalamu alaikum. I would like Dr. Jeffrey to answer this question for me. I'm a devoted Muslim and I have a friend who knows I'm highly devoted. Sometimes when I'm praying, he will call and the wife will say, my wife will tell him I'm praying. But because of this, he's a Christian and he feels sympathy for me that with all these things I'm doing, there's no way for me to go to heaven because I do not believe in Christ as made the Son of God. He tells me specifically that Christ says that if you do not believe in him, that you cannot go to heaven. What type of answer do I need to give to him?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I think, as Muslims, I think we always feel we have to have an answer when somebody presents their particular religious view to us. We have to be able to refute it. And so, in that circumstance, I think the typical Muslim would say, that doesn't make sense to me. How can Christ take on my sins and get into long debates and arguments over the nature of Jesus, the role of Jesus, and why would God do this and why would God do that? Frankly, I mean, just from my personality perspective, my own personality, my approach is different. When an atheist or a Christian or a Hindu presents his point of view, and he says, I believe this, then I usually tell him, well, I don't believe that, and this is what I believe. You know, to get into a debate going back and forth could just go on and on and on. You start attacking his point of view, he feels defensive. I really don't feel that goes very far. And as Dr. Bedawi said earlier, debates are probably the least productive way. The point I'm trying to make is simply this. As Brother Hamid said, one of my major themes is we Muslims are very good at telling other people what they do wrong. We're not very good at presenting what we do right. I would say that we should, in general, in circumstances like that, and in general circumstances, when we speak to an audience, tell the people about Islam. The gentleman just shared his point of view with you. Take the opportunity to share yours. No, I don't believe this. I believe that the purpose of life is this. I believe that God works like this. I believe our relationship to God is this. Present your point of view on that issue, rather than have to defend or attack his. You see what I mean? That way, at least he comes to appreciate a different point of view. Brother Hamid says, say this, because I always say this. I said that it's like, the famous analogy is of the diamond and the rock analogy. I see Muslims like this. A fellow over here is holding a rock, and we're dead set on getting him to let go of that rock and to take this diamond that we believe we have. And how do we proceed? We begin by telling him that for generations his family has held this rock, and it's worthless, and it's ugly, and it's dirty, and it makes no sense. And meanwhile, we're holding the diamond behind our back. And if anything, that human being is likely to hold on to it all the more and tell you, well, you know, what do you got? What right do you have to tell me, to criticize me, to attack me? A much more profitable method is to take the message of Islam directly. You don't have to answer every charge and every objection. Just tell them about Islam. Hold the diamond in the sky. Hold it up like this. I think many people, when they see the diamond, and you start talking about the diamond, many people would just forget about this rock they had and say to you, where could I get that diamond? But I think that's not the strategy we've been taking. But I hope that sort of answers your question.
So the sisters want to give.
Actually, I just have a question for Mr. Badawi.
This one. Come here.
And what I wanted to ask is, right now I'm part of a class that we've developed teaching basically American non-Muslim women about Islam, who are interested in Islam. And one of the problems that we've had is many of them are married to men who are Muslims. However, they don't happen to be very good examples of Islam. We find that we'll teach them something, and or we have Quranic lessons, also Hadith and Islamic teaching, and they'll go home and share with their husband what they've learned, and then many times the husband will tell them, oh, that's not how it is, because the husband actually himself is doing things that are not allowed or prohibited in Islam. And I wondered what you think the best way of going about presenting this to the people without offending their husbands or making them take them away from Islam, because we've had one sister who was very interested in becoming Muslim, and her husband prevented her from coming back and said we were fanatics, and just because we were presenting the true Islam and not the distorted version of Islam. I wondered if you had any comments or...
It looks like there are three basic reasons why those husbands take this attitude. One, of course, is the common feeling that you find among some, that I have born Muslim but you just accepted Islam, so I should know better than you do, which could be the opposite. Number two, because he's a man, she's a woman, and men are supposed to know better than women. I'm describing, not approving. The third thing, to reflect this chauvinistic type of thinking sometimes, that how could I get an advice from a woman, you know. The third aspect, it appears, is that we try to make make religion in our own image, you know. Religion is what I'm doing. So a sort of common attitude of avoidance of the truth, because I cannot stand and say I'm wrong on that. As to what to do based on that possible diagnosis, we have to understand that it requires some degree of patience. Things wouldn't happen overnight, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for da'wah the most resolute of His creatures, the prophets. So the sister can act also in the manner of the prophets by being patient, not to lose her temper, still show affection, because maybe through affection and good relationship the husband might reconsider. Sometimes the indirect approach might be better, that hey, you're wrong in this, but you know, even appearing in the form of asking a question, even though you know the answer. You know, honey, I encountered this problem, what do you think of that? I read that hadith, could you explain it to me? Maybe he might have some second thought about what he's doing, but it requires some patience and tact. Wallahu a'lam.
Brother was, unfortunately we can't cover all of these. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to show my appreciation for all our speakers. Alhamdulillah, they have given us an excellent idea about what we should do to help the Christians understand Islam, no doubt. However, I would like to ask them one question, that we have to also understand the similar well-arranged scheme is being done by the Christians for more than 100 years. And are we familiar with that? Like example, have you been in touch with the SIM International Activities, SIM Now magazine? How many of you do understand or you are aware of this article which they have shown about Pakistan, where they are claiming that when they went there was not a single Muslim convert in the Christianity. And you can see this one. Okay, and if you don't mind, I'll read that. I went overseas with the idea of training and disciplining Christians. He remembers. When I got there, I found some converts, but none from a Muslim background. So my first term was spent evangelizing and discovering how to communicate with Muslims. Today there are about 500 believers in almost 20 groups that have grown out of the work. Larry and his wife Gail are a part of it. What is happening, sir, that they are on the front, but on the back of it, what is happening is that our innocent children are being victimized and going away from the home and becoming Christians. I got one good example. I won't tell the name because it makes a record. So recently, we got a letter explaining that I am now a child of Christ. I am no more with Muslims. So what I tell our people is that, and here last one I'll tell you.
We're not going to read anymore. Just tell me what's the point. Okay, I'll help you. I'll help you.
Please.
I just want to help you. Okay.
With all the formidable strength of the Islamic world, are Muslims coming to Christ? The answer is that yes, the cracked wall of Islam. Oh, by all means they are. Significant, exciting things are happening in some countries. There are churches that are made up of entirely Muslim countries.
Okay, let me ask you. What's the point?
So the point now is that we should always look for what Christians are doing against and back of us, rather than be on the front to say about, to make them Muslim. Okay, we have to make sure that our people don't become Christians.
Okay. So is this a comment or a
I'll
question?
give you an 800 number. I don't have the 8 number, but I'll give you a number to call and get a free copy of this magazine. So you can yourself be in the future. The number is, I have a 800 number, but I have...
Okay, everybody knows him. So inshallah, I'll let them talk to you. Thank you, because we're running out of time.
The telephone number is...
Thank you. We'll take it. Okay, thank you, brother. Thank you. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. I wanted to ask the brothers, we live in a small town and we have a lot of Christian community and non-Muslims, Jews and others, and a lot of them are very fascinated with Islam. But how do we pop the question? Like Brother Imam Siraj Fahad said that his son asked his mother or something, and mashallah she said Ashhadu an la ilaha. But when do we know it's the right time to ask them without offending them and turning them away? And one more thing is, if they ask for a copy of Quran, should we give it to them? And if they want to come to masjid, is it allowed to have them come to masjid? Because we have sometimes some Muslim brothers and sisters who turn them away, unfortunately, by saying something to them, and all this that you have built up, everything goes wasted. If you would elaborate that, I'll really appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, sister.
Okay, well, very briefly. As far as giving a copy of the Quran, I have absolutely no problem with that. Again, in my little booklet on Tahara, I explained some aspect about the translations of the Quran. I have no problem for the purpose of da'wah. But of course, it would be nice to bring to their attention that they should treat it with respect. Secondly, should they be allowed in the masjid? We cannot be more Muslim than Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who received the deputation of Christians of Najran in his masjid and welcomed them and tried to serve them food himself. I don't know where some people in some places get so uptight. I'm not saying your area. Get so uptight about the mushriks and the kafirs coming to the masjid. How could they know? Unless they come and sometimes sit down and watch. We don't have to tell them you have to pray with us. Say, you don't have to. You can sit and watch. There's no problem with that. About the time to invite, that's a difficult question, because if you make the wrong timing, a person would be turned off because it becomes a very sort of direct, pushy type of thing. But sometimes you might feel that the person has learned enough that somehow you feel there is some hesitation, and if you feel at that time that a direct invitation might be appropriate, by all means, one have to judge the situation.
I was just going to say, you don't have to give a direct invitation. It sometimes helps just to say, I noticed you're quite curious. I'm just curious. Are you just wanting this information for information, or are you actually thinking of becoming a Muslim? In a way that doesn't really put them on the spot where they, like you're saying, make a decision. But just, I'm curious. Sometimes that helps.
I want to say two quick points.
What we should do? They're so interested. Should we give them Quran right away?
Basically, the sister's asking the question, should we give the Quran right away, or should we just give them Islamic focus or some other material? Inshallah. I'm going to give the mic back to Sheikh Jamal in a moment. I want to combine the point that you made, the question that you made, and sister, your point. One of the great ways when Christians attack us
especially with Jesus, is to disarm them. You cannot disarm a Christian better than say, we love Jesus. We cannot be Muslim unless we believe in Jesus. Prophet Jesus will come back. When you say that, my experience is they're disarmed because they expected you to fight it. When they said, with Jesus, you got to believe in Jesus, you got to accept Jesus. He said, yes, you got to accept Jesus. Let me tell you what Muslims believe about Jesus. Jesus is one of the greatest prophets ever. Jesus is one. We love Jesus. Jesus was born from a virgin mother. You disarm them totally. In terms of when to ask the question, you got to be sensitive. See, my son, he's 5 years old. He can say, when you going to become Muslim? But I was with some brothers, and we were some politicians, governmental people. And but I couldn't believe what the brother was saying. Well, you got to be Muslim. You got to be Muslim. He don't be Muslim, he don't go to hell. Well, it's not the right time. You see, you got to be very sensitive to who you're talking to. As you're talking to people, believe me, you get a sense of them. You get a sense to even when to invite them to the masjid. You know, and me and you had a conversation last week, and we were talking about something. I got a book for you I want to give to you. Right? So it's always in the flow of the conversation. It's just not out of left field. It's in the flow of the conversation. We're talking about abortion. As you know that Muslims have a view about abortion, and when you get to a point when a person has discussed so much about Islam, you might want to just say, you know, I'm going to the masjid on Friday at 1 o'clock. What you doing? You think you'd like to come? Like that. Also, by the way, in subhanAllah, and I thank Allah for this, I was recently in Birmingham, England. A sister came to me. She was very shy. You can see after the speaking in the lecture, she was standing to the side like she was very shy, like she wanted to like ask me a question. And she got a brother to say, "Can I say something?" We went to the sister. She said, "Imam, we had gotten some tapes that you've done, and played it for non-Muslims. 15 non-Muslims became Muslims as a result of listening to the tapes." Why do I say that? Sometimes, brothers and sisters, when a person just listens and there's no chance for debate, they're not going to argue with the tape. They're going to listen or watch the tape and learn something from it. Sheikh Jamal Badawi has some tapes, brothers and sisters, Islam in focus, that are, you'd be shocked how many people get the seed of Islam for listening to those kinds of tapes. So you might want to do that, inshallah. But Brother Jamal is going to mention the last point that the sister made about the Quran. Should we get the other one? Pardon?
Okay, I would like to just to remind the speakers that we also would like to make quick comments so that we ask 2 more questions.
About giving, what to give first, it depends on the circumstances. For example, there might be a Muslim-Christian dialogue and somebody come explicitly asking for the Quran because he's so impressed with some of the ayat in the Quran. Good. That way he would read on his own, and a lot of people become Muslim just by reading the translation even of the Quran. If you're making da'wah to the public and a lot of people just coming superficially to a table and they want to pick something, maybe a small booklet, Islam at a glance, bridge building between Muslim and Christian, small things like that might be a good beginning. And say, if he's interested, he or she comes back, because we don't have infinite numbers of copies of the Quran to distribute. So one has to assess the situation again.
Make sure, Brother Amir Ali, where's Amir? Yeah. Make sure you go and pick up these little Islam at a glance. But Amir Ali, wallahi, to me, one of the best in the world. Very, very, in New York City, everybody knows about that. So you have enough to give to the people. Please go into the bazaar area, and Brother Amir Ali has a table of da'wah, and pick up that literature free of charge, inshallah.
Sorry for everybody, I just have to pick up somebody randomly, so...
I have one question for the professor, and that is that I happen to be dealing with some very highly educated professionals who are atheists at this time. And as you mentioned, I'm unable to connect, and I miss every time what the opportunity I get. And one thing I want to ask is, maybe you can help me. An atheist, when he is thinking he doesn't believe in God, does he still have some concept of a power beyond his control power of nature or whatever, does he have some kind of a thinking about it, or doesn't he have no concept of a power or a superpower? I still want to have one more comment for Jamal Badawi also.
The question was, how do you connect with an atheist, especially if they're highly educated? Most of my colleagues at the University of Kansas and most of my colleagues in America are atheists or agnostics. So I deal, I think, with a very different crowd than Dr. Badawi or Siraj Wahhaj deals with. And the approaches have to be different, as they said, according to the people you're dealing with. An atheist really doesn't respond to a very aggressive approach. If he gets even a hint that you're trying to lead him or sneak him through the back door into his religion, he'll resent that even more than if you take a direct approach and say, look, I'm trying to convert you, I want to convert you, he'll fight you on that regard, but if you try to trick him, he'll resent you all the more, and you'll just shut the door on it. The other question, and it relates to this, is, do atheists sometimes feel that there may be a God, essentially? And there was a saying that they used to say a lot in World War II, that there's no atheists in foxholes. To some degree that's true. I believe that atheists every now and then, just as most religious people now and then entertain a doubt about their beliefs, atheists will at one time or another entertain a doubt about their positions. I remember when I was an atheist and I'd get through arguing with somebody, a Christian or a Jewish person or a Muslim, for 20 or 30 minutes, a discussion, I'd walk away and think, well, what if they were right? Really, what if they are right? What am I risking? And sometimes that would make me study religions all the more. Psychologically, I felt I wanted to convince myself, make sure I was right. And generally, when I spoke to people and read about the religion, it confirmed my position. It was only the Quran that suddenly shocked me. But, what kind of atheist I was? I was a searching atheist. The type that asks people questions. And he's comfortable as long as he's doing the asking. But I'll be frank with you, many times I would ask somebody a question and somebody would say, this is my opportunity. And next thing I know, I was his dawah or missionary project. No thank you. Thank you, but no thank you. Then that was the end of it.
Sorry, I'll have to take the sister over here, and she's been standing for a long time.
Assalamu alaikum. I have some comment to make. I think the best way to make dawah is through our behavior, whether it's in the workforce or in public. Because sometimes you see, like, the Muslim children, they're running around crazy. And as a convert, before I convert, I would look at those Arab children. They're wild, they're not behaved. So I think the best way is through our behavior, whether we're in the workforce or in the mall or anywhere, is through our behavior, to behave in whether it's ourselves or our children. I think that's the best way also, because if they see us as behaved and well-mannered, they could become interested in Islam just for that reason.
Thank you, sister. Sorry, we have to conclude the session, so I apologize for everybody. I'll just give the chance for the speakers to conclude, and then we'll end the session. I understand there is a need for these things, and that makes us in the planning process of making something, inshallah, that would go in this direction.
No, that's okay. I have nothing to say. If you want to extend it 5 minutes, because there's a great deal of interest.
Let me just make one brief concluding comment, because I think it relates to the last question, and I just want to make a concluding comment. I think it's very helpful for Muslims when they are communicating their religious perceptions to others, is to try to put a certain idea out of your head. And I know this is going to sound bizarre. People often criticize me for it, but maybe it's just the community of people I deal with. Put out of your head that you're going to convert this person to Islam. See, the minute you start thinking that this is a potential convert, I have to win him over, I'm going to grab him with this or that line, you're giving yourself too much credit. As the Quran told Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, time and time again, he's not responsible for what happens to these people. He's only responsible to deliver the message sincerely and truthfully to the very best of his ability. Leave the conversion up to God, because the minute you start giving yourself more credit, I think it really does damage to the message you're trying to relate. Don't be out to convert this person, just be out to do your duty to convey that message as clearly and truthfully and as appropriately as possible.
Brothers and sisters, I'm sorry, I really thank you all. Okay, the problem is there is another session in 5 minutes here, so that's the problem. So I really apologize for everybody, and thank you all, and hopefully inshallah we'll have another session similar to that.
One more, the interest is overwhelming really, Allah. So maybe